And we started our RPA journey, I want to say maybe 2 to 3 years ago. So we're still pretty new into sort of how our adoption is. Altura has always been sort of a very process-oriented organization, and we felt like we ran pretty lean. Over the last few years, and especially through sort of the pandemic, we really kind of became aware of sort of all the friction and like little kind of pieces of non-value that existed in our process. At the same time, we're growing pretty rapidly, so that pressure was starting to get on there. And so we as an organization started looking for ways like, okay, how do we sort of get some value and some optimizations in these processes? I think Eric had mentioned oftentimes when we looked at sort of process improvement or ways to innovate, we'd go out and look for vendors, for new like loan origination systems or something like that. And that's great, but those are huge efforts, right? And maybe we're just getting 4 or 5 optimizations out of it. When we heard about RPA and we sort of understood some of the things it could bring, we said, like, this is probably a better solution for us, right? We can optimize some of these friction processes without a lot of work. As we got learning into it and we started kind of, looking out there in the space to see who could help us in this journey, one of the things we became aware is that a lot of sort of the firms that are providing, RPA, they really talk about all these great benefits, which is true, but we didn't want this gigantic implementation from the inset. We knew it could get there, but we needed to see some things first, right? To kind of believe in the technology and to see how well it worked for us. So we were fortunate enough to kind of connect with Endurium, and really they understood sort of where we wanted to go and understand that, hey, we're looking just from some of these smaller action-oriented processes. And that's what we did. So I want to say probably in 2020, the tail end of 2020, we identified, we had process maps. So we identified just about 2 or 3 kind of small level processes we wanted to look to optimize through RPA. And one of the things, at least is for us, that was important, and many credit union professionals will agree with this, is that ROA is great. But a lot of times it's about what's the experience for them, right? And how do we optimize some of these low value for the employee steps that could be creating friction? And so just to give like a really clear example of what it meant for us was, when we process a loan application, we do all the work, process the application, talk to the member, do all the sales cycle. And at the very last tail end of the piece, the member has to sign, say, a DocuSign, and then the loan is funded. And what we discovered was that oftentimes, because that's such a tail end of the process and the funders have moved on, the sales folks have moved on, once the members signed their documentation and it came back into our queue, it would just kind of sit there for a few hours, right? Until the funder got to it and then clicked a few buttons and then sent it off and funded the member's loan. But we understood like, hey, the members are done. Like they're waiting on us. And so we thought, hey, this would be a perfect kind of test case for RPA. It's just a few clicks. It's not anything that really too many people value, but the members will value it a lot. So that's what we approached Endurium with. And they said, yep, we can help you with that. And I want to say the development probably took just a few weeks. And it was probably mostly on our end, just kind of like, not really understanding how RPA worked and kind of that. Once we implemented it, not only did like the funders realize, great, this is like tiny little piece that I had to do is no longer part of my thing and I can do other things. But now we were able to say to disperse loans, fund loans after they signed, right? So now it's like 24/7. So members home at 10 p.m., they sign their documentations, money's in their account. And so we were getting feedback from members like, oh, this is great. Like, this is so awesome. You did it. And that's something that we didn't even really anticipate as being sort of a benefit from this small little process. That kind of clued everyone in. And a lot of the business units are like, wow, we saw what you did with the loan disbursement bot. I have this and I have that. It just really started to build a lot of the excitement, a lot of the business units who had heard about this. And so this is exactly what we wanted to happen. It's okay, great. This is definitely a technology we can leverage. And we built, like just this year, we created a whole strategic plan around implementation. Again, scaling up now our adoption, but making sure that we're doing it in the right way, right? So at the very beginning, it was just kind of like, hey, let's just test this out like a proof of concept. But now that we have an organized strategy around it and how to implement it, how to build the framework, how to do the requirements testing, all this kind of integrating into all their other business units. And we have a small development team that's now kind of leading this, right? And Endurium's helping us with that. But I think for credit unions, and this is the kind of one thing I'd like to share is that that initial step that really kind of got people to understand, like, here's a benefit, that was great. And to be able to do that in sort of a low risk. There wasn't a lot of capital that had to be expended, just to kind of realize that benefit. It gave a lot of people the confidence, like this is a technology that's going to work for us and for what we want. I think for us, for credit unions, that's key, right? Because we're always very like capital sensitive, right? It's our members' money, right? And we're always having to kind of battle for resources. So that's something I think is definitely a good takeaway. And that's something that I think that really enabled Altura to get into RPA and feel really confident about its benefits without having to like fully commit from day one. That's sort of just a broad, I know I kind of went quickly through that, lots of details there, but if you have my contact, of course, and then enduring folks there, but that's kind of just the one takeaway is that the ability to kind of test and get into these things and then seeing how fast it adopted afterwards, that's our story.
It's great, Kevin. Thank you. I appreciate that. And, Altura has been a tremendous, tremendous client for us. And we will see here pretty soon, their adoption journey really follows the recommended adoption journey that we talk about with credit unions. But, a couple of key things when we were talking about that loan disbursement was some of the beauty that comes out of this initiative. Yes, you'll get the automation, you'll get the benefits. But for a lot of credit unions and for a lot of leaders, we will actually do basically a process optimization assessment prior to even going to the bot, right? So a lot of times we'd improve the process before we even automated. And there were sometimes steps that the team was taking that when we stopped and asked the questions like, hey, why are we doing this or why are we doing this? We were able just to optimize it right there on the fly. And then when we were able to build a bot on it, now the bot is optimizing the even new, more optimized process, kind of going forward. So you get sort of an operational optimization assessment and you get the improvements out of that. And then you also get the automation kind of going forward. So Kevin mentioned we're able to start really small with them, which is what we recommend with credit unions so they can get the buy-in from a change management perspective. And then we can kind of scale up, out there at their leisure or at their adoption journey rate.